I think that's a very important question, and this is more about the organization of how to have data science teams and AI teams, etc. And I know we tried a number of things in Spotify for that, and you now have like an AI team, and you can think about pros and cons of having a central team, perhaps being a bit disconnected to the product, but still you have the critical mass to actually have some really productive type of people. And then you can have consultants, as you said, that actually help product teams. What do you think the best way to do this is? Should data scientists be embedded in product teams? Should they have a central team? How should you do it?
I think this is like a very important topic close to my heart because it's an unsolved problem, I would say. Depends on the size of the company. So in smaller companies, in smaller startups, you probably look for a different recipe than like a larger companies. I think the key factor is what you said, the critical mass. So if you need a critical mass for each of them to work, but I would go for a hybrid because I think it's important to have a longer investment. So you need a research component that is more focused, but also I think research should not be very disjoint from product. So I don't remember which company, but one of these big companies, what they do is that when you join a company, they send you to product teams. And then you are resident there for a month. You shadow people, you learn about like a lot of things, you learn about metrics, their challenges, and then you go back to your team. Right. So a hybrid system, I think, is good. Where an example is that, like, if you have people that they can come to as an incubator, join to the research if they want to do more research, or like a research. You
mean going from product to research, or vice versa?
Both.
So having a good interaction.
Yeah.
Good.
But for any of this work, you need a critical mass, right? So that's why I say it's a hard thing to solve.
But we have talked about this and explored the organizational topic. If I'm relating back to the work I've been doing the last 4 or 5 years, first with Vattenfall and now on consultant basis with the Scania, Grundfos. So this is in a more industrial setting, and coming from a company which has a traditional analog business, right? And there is clearly a data literacy issue here. We actually talk a lot more about orchestration than organization. And what I mean with orchestration is the fundamentals of, if I look at the use case lifecycle and I truly understand where's the business value, who owns the P&L, and in my case, who owns the people that's supposed to adopt data-driven decision-making and stuff like this. It's like one business value stream from ideation to production to operations. And then we talk about the core technology side, which we split up in the data science part and also the operations. And then we have, of course, a quite huge stream, which is simply data management, data governance, GDPR. So this whole orchestration piece, what about this? How do you do that? I think this is more important even than organization.
I think Gradient Descent company has done a good job on putting together something called maturity index, AI maturity index, which is I think when you start looking at starting like AI orchestration in a company, you need to first map out in all of these dimensions that you mentioned, data, people, business, infra, where you are, so that you have a score on each dimension and you know where you are, and then you can start planning and figuring out how you can solve it. I think in my case, I've had the luxury of working with data-driven people. Sometimes probably
data-driven companies, I would even say.
But I've also seen, if you move from, for instance, when I worked in Spotify, if you move from one org to another, one org is super data-driven, the other one is not. And then you see a huge difference of the adoption or possibilities of even how that affects infrastructure work and so on and so on. So, but still, like I had the luxury of working in the companies that they want to be data driven.
But speaking about these two companies then a bit, you have had the luxury or have the luxury to work at two of the top Swedish tech companies. And still, if you were to try to compare them, what do you think the differences between Spotify and King are?
Difficult question to compare.
Good question.
I think it depends. I mean, if you think about data or you think about like products or like culture, you see like different angles, right?
Yeah.
And I think they are both like rather large companies. I would say like King is probably larger in Stockholm than like other locations, while Spotify is probably more internationally spread, and that brings like some differences, like meetings, for instance, how many virtual meetings you have versus like in-person meetings.
Which one would you say is the higher number of meetings?
Virtual meetings is Spotify, definitely, because I had, for instance, half of my team in sitting in New York and half of my team sitting in Stockholm. But the Spotify, but King has been more like I've usually have meetings within Stockholm, sometimes meeting with London or Berlin, or Barcelona. But it's way much less. So your focus is more on the site. Thinking about data, I would say King is probably have been a lot focused on building a good infrastructure for A/B testing and automation of a lot of data science work that you do. So there's a lot of libraries and packages that is like, this makes my life super easy. I think Spotify has a really good infrastructure, data infrastructure team. And then when it comes to research, then of course like Spotify has way much larger org for research, but I'm hoping that at King we can get there too.
With your help, you'll get there, right? But speaking about research, some people, or how would you describe the difference between a research team and a product team?
I think we touched a bit on that, that the cycle of work is very different. I remember once I was in a product team or even an engineering team once, and you want to tell them that, listen, I can't put a Jira ticket and say that like I check mark this one like in one day.
Yeah, Scrum time box it.
Yeah, Scrum. Yeah. So you get a lot of, especially if you're more junior, you get a lot of anxiety of why am I not delivering while others are delivering. But I mean, to be a bit more serious, I think the pace is different, and like the stress of like delivery and the business request affects a lot of the of decision makings and priorities, and also I think research teams probably spend less time on product quality work. So sometimes, depending on how they are formulated, like in our case, we have a whole infrastructure as our focus, but that means that like there is also like sometimes there is a technical depth that like you have.
Which one is the larger? Obvious kind of perhaps question, but still.
The technical depth, I mean, depends. If you think about a product team that has a strong engineering backbone, obviously they have a less technical depth. Yeah. But in research team, you have a high technical depth. Yeah. But sometimes also if you go to a company where product team is just patching and they have a fast delivery and they are stressed with like delivering something, they might actually do a lot of duct taping, which will break when you want to scale something. While research might think of, if you have like infrastructure thinking, you might actually think that through in a better pace.